Welcome to the Immigrant Gun Owner. My name is Matthias. Thank you for tuning in. If you haven't heard about us, we are a very niche little podcast here. The purpose of this podcast is to tell stories about immigrant gun owners. I want to talk about their origin stories. I want to talk to immigrants. I want to talk to first generation Americans, and I want to talk to subject matter experts. When I became a firearms instructor and a range safety officer at my club, I noticed, and I knew this before, but I noticed from firsthand experience how very diverse the gun community is. There are people from all creeds, races, ages, and genders. The gun community welcomes anybody, and as far as the topic of firearms and Second Amendment rights goes, it's a very inclusive community. My dog Lucky is part of that community too. Come on. This is Lucky. You probably know him from my Instagram. But I have noticed that whenever I go to a city council meeting or a town hall meeting or things like GRPC, Gun Rights Policy Conference, you usually have a very homogeneous crowd. It is a bunch of old white men, for the most part. But I know that is not the case, that is not true. It's just that I've noticed that immigrants choose to exercise their Second Amendment rights more in private, behind closed doors. They go to the range, and then they go home. They don't participate. But from talking to people, I know there's a lot of interesting stories out there, and I've noticed that a lot of people might not know how to get involved in the gun community, or they come from a background where gun ownership is either illegal or frowned upon, so they don't have the motivation to become gun owners in the first place. Nobody comes to America because of guns. People come to America for freedom, for liberty, for economic opportunity. Guns is something that people get into later, either as a specific need or a want that they discover somewhere along the road. And the purpose of this podcast is to tell those stories, to talk with and about those immigrants in order to encourage other people to be more open about gun ownership and to participate more openly. Along the road, as we record more episodes, you'll probably also find out more about my personal background. I don't want to make it about me. You probably know I'm from Germany. I'm an immigrant at this point. I've been in the States for 16 years. And coming to America from Germany, I was always the typical liberal Euro boy. I didn't know anything about guns. I just knew what the media told me. And there was a time when I was thinking, what do these Americans want with all their guns? Why is that a thing? That's so crazy to me. Now I'm over here, and once I'm a citizen now, but once I had a green card, literally within a week, I got my first firearm. I got a CCW in Massachusetts, where I lived at the time, within a week of getting a green card. So, needless to say, I am fully assimilated. I have a cowboy hat and a pair of boots and a belt with a big buckle and a closet full of guns at this point. I'm a firearms instructor and involved in the Second Amendment very actively. But like I said, there are a lot of interesting stories out there. And today I want to start from the very beginning. Use this podcast as you want, either for entertainment or for educational purposes. We are going to talk today about prohibited persons very broadly, a certain case very specifically, and then throughout these episodes, as you watch this podcast, which I hope you will, you'll learn more about how to get involved, how to become a gun owner, how to do it legally, how to do it safely. If you need those resources, share it with other people, and use it to encourage others to participate. So, with that being said, let me introduce to you my first guest, somebody I would definitely consider a subject matter expert, not an immigrant himself, but as expert as they come. My friend Gary Gibson, who is a local criminal defense attorney here in San Diego. Say hi, Gary.
How you doing, Matthias?
Very good. How about you? So, Gary, let's start at the beginning. Some people that watch this probably know a thing or two about firearms, but there might be people that are completely new to this, either because they discovered me or it was recommended to them to listen to the podcast. Who can and cannot own firearms in America? Let's start with that.
All right.
Can you pause? Could you angle the mic down? Or bring it down and then angle it up. There you go. Because otherwise the mic
It's blocking my face.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
You just have to edit this bit out.
Okay, let me ask this question again then.
Okay.
So Gary, let's start at the beginning. Coming to America from a country where gun ownership is illegal, is not possible, is too elitist, or people just don't know how to become legal gun owners because it's super convoluted and a privilege rather than a right. In America, who can and cannot be a gun owner?
That's a pretty broad category of who can own guns in America, but let me start with saying I am an immigrant.
You are?
I immigrated to the United States in 1969 from Scotland, and I had a green card until 1976 when I became a citizen and joined the United States military.
No way, I thought you were born here this whole time.
I was not. It's just I had a really strong Scottish accent when I came here, but when you're 10 years old and you start getting your head flushed in the toilet at school, because you've got an accent, you lose that pretty quickly.
Oh, I never knew that about you.
I did. I'm a former green card holder.
Well, welcome to America.
Back at you. It's a pretty broad category. I mean, we can do the easy ones, felons, but that actually isn't an easy category right now.
It's not all felons, correct?
No, it's all felons. Under
about
federal
felons?
law, if you have a felony conviction, you're not getting a firearm.
Okay.
But that's changing, and rightfully so, because I think most rational people would say there is a difference from somebody that got convicted of a felony 5 years ago for robbing a store than someone that got convicted of a felony 30 years ago for lying on his welfare application.
Right, mail fraud or stuff like that.
And so
yeah.
is there a difference between nonviolent felons and violent felons? And that actually is going through the federal courts right now because of Bruin. Whether nonviolent felons with decades-old felonies should be allowed to have guns. I'm a proponent of that. I think that absolutely you should lose your prohibited status depending upon your felony, type of felony, nonviolent, aging out over decades. There's no reason to prohibit people from having firearms who have long dead felony cases.
Okay, on principle, I agree with that. I find that absolutely reasonable.
It's a rational interpretation of who should have a firearm in America and what make people safe. If you hate guns and you want nobody to have a firearm, then absolutely all felons should never have guns because it fits in your philosophy. If you believe that firearms ownership should be available to responsible citizens, at some point you regain your responsibility as a felon.
Yeah, you can redeem yourself,
a murderer,
right?
maybe never.
Yeah.
A sex offender, maybe never. But people with nonviolent felonies, maybe so. And we'll find out about that in the next few years because it's going through the federal courts right now.
Okay, yeah, I think you're redeemable.
Well, all of my felonies have been sealed as a juvenile, and so I'm fine with guns right now.
Okay, I'm not
Right, so
going to
felons.
ask details there.
And there's an extension of that category, misdemeanors.
Yeah.
Do people that have misdemeanors, are they prohibited from owning firearms? And the answer in California is
Depends on the misdemeanor.
hell yeah.
Yeah.
Because California does what California does, which makes gun ownership and possession incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
And so California has a category of prohibitions on misdemeanors. So you get a misdemeanor conviction 8 years ago. Well, you might have a 10-year prohibition. But what are some examples of that? Brandishing a firearm. Well, that seems to have a rational relationship to firearms. So I get that. I think it's a little excessive when somebody's probation period is over. They never went to jail. Their case is long dead and has been expunged or sealed. Now it's 6 years after that. Well, maybe they should have regained their rights to a firearm, but California says 10. Here's the ones I disagree with. Assault. Assault is an attempted battery in California. That means I tried to punch you and missed. 9 years ago, I'm a prohibited person for another year. So assault, battery, a bar fight, not involving weapons of any kind, 10-year prohibition. And so California and some other states have prohibited people based on misdemeanors. In fact, if you get 2 brandishings in California, you have a lifetime prohibition. If you have a domestic violence misdemeanor, you have a lifetime prohibition, not just through California, through the federal government because of the Lautenberg Amendment.
Okay.
And it makes it, you have some ability to regain your gun ownership through Lautenberg, but it is narrower in California. And so anything to do with domestic violence is awful for you with regard to your gun ownership. And sometimes I've seen clients who I've gone to trial with solely because they could not plead guilty to anything that involved domestic violence, even though it may have been a good idea that the primary focus of that person was future gun ownership. So they were willing to take the risk of receiving a penal sanction in order not to lose their firearms rights.
Okay.
Now, I get it. It's your life. You know, you just need to make fully informed decisions. But they're your decisions. I don't live with the consequences of what happens. You do. As long as I've informed you of what the choices are and what the risks are, well, you make your choices.
Okay.
So we got felonies. We've got misdemeanors, depending upon the state. Many states don't have misdemeanor prohibitions.
Okay.
California does.
Here's one that I don't know how I feel about this one. Anybody dishonorably discharged from the military.
That is correct.
I mean, it depends on why you were dishonorably discharged. I don't know what could cause a dishonorable discharge.
It could be just about anything. It could be a significant volume or significant amount of dollar loss in a theft, stole government property in the millions of dollars. Okay. You got a dishonorable discharge. It could be violence. It could not be violence. We just don't know. Your dishonorable discharge can come for just about any serious reason. They don't generally throw out DD, or duck dinners, as we used to say in the military. They don't show out DDs for just anything. Most separations that are negative come as OTHs, other than honorable. But the DDs are a prohibition. In fact, it's the reason that the CCW, if you have a CCW, one of the questions that you're asked on CCW is, have you ever served in the military? They're not doing that to say you're a good patriot. They're doing that to see if you got a DD-214, which makes you federally prohibited.
And I think that's, for the purpose of this podcast, I think that's an important category because that is a very common path to citizenship for a lot of people. Is the military.
The military is a common path to citizenship. You better hope you don't get a DD-214. One, you're not getting your citizenship, and 2, you're not getting any guns.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, so we've got that. You're right on that. DD-214s, misdemeanors, felonies.
Do you know how common that is?
Uncommon.
Yeah.
There aren't many. You don't get many DDs out of the military. I mean, not many. You might get a few hundred a year. At most.
Okay, that's not a big group.
Out of the military, no, it's a very small group of people.
All right.
Mental issues.
Okay.
For example, in California, and I'm in the middle of litigating one of these right now, and I've litigated one in the past. There's a process in California for an involuntary 72-hour mental health hold. Yeah. Basically, a cop comes out to your house.
What's that, a 5150?
5150. Welfare and Institutions Code. You can look it up. Go into Google, type in Welfare and Institutions 5150. You read all about it. A cop comes out to your house or gets you on the street, and he thinks that you're not doing so well mentally. They can take you to the county mental health center, and they can hold you for 72 hours. Doesn't have to be a case filed against you. Just need a doctor to say, yeah, you know what? He would benefit from a 72-hour hold.
What's the what are the conditions under which the cop can do those?
If he believes that you're not capable of taking care of yourself and you're having a mental issue that makes you incapable of taking care of yourself.
Now, is that a subjective
or a danger to yourself or others?
Is that a subjective assessment, or is there a checklist where the cop has to?
Completely subjective.
Okay.
But when they get to the county mental health facility, they do a more detailed evaluation because, I mean, they're subject to liability, as the cop is. They do a more detailed evaluation to see if you're currently a danger to yourself or others. But it can be simple. It can be as simple as suicidal ideation.
Okay.
In fact, I've had a case where somebody who at work told his boss that they were suicidal. Boss called county mental health, and they got locked up for 3 days.
Okay.
It's a very broad statute that is used selectively, fortunately. I don't see it being misused, but it is susceptible to being misused.
Yeah, sure.
And so you get locked up for 3 days, and that's it. No criminal charges, no anything. Well, you have a 5-year prohibition in California.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. How long is the prohibition?
And in fact, if you have a 5150 with a prior, that's a lifetime prohibition. So 2 5150s get you a lifetime prohibition.
Okay.
Now, there's a process in California, again, if you want to look it up, Welfare and Institutions Code 8103 F6. You can look it up. Which says that you have a right to petition a judge to restore your firearms rights. So I've done a couple of those.
And are those pretty easy, straightforward, or convoluted?
Well, the standard of proof is that the prosecutor has to prove that you can't operate firearms in a safe manner. That's the standard.
Okay, that's a pretty low threshold.
But the prosecutor only has to prove that by preponderance of the evidence, 50.1%. So it's not beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not clear and convincing evidence. It's a middle of the road standard. And what it becomes is, can you make the judge comfortable that you're not going to kill yourself or somebody else? So I'll give you your gun back if I feel comfortable you're not going to kill yourself or somebody else. And so it's not really about the legal standard. It's about making the judge feel good. And so generally what I do in those cases is I've got to bring in family members. We're okay with them having a gun. We've seen nothing. This was impulsive. This was something other than what you believe it to be. Yes, they had the 72-hour hold. They'd never been on medication. They have no mental health history. I usually bring in an independent third-party psychologist or psychiatrist to do a report and say, based on my report, I don't think they have a mental health diagnosis. I just think this was impulsive, and I have no trouble with them believing that they're going to be a danger to themselves or others.
Okay.
So, but it can get complicated. And again, I'm pricey. So it's going to cost you money. Here's a plug. Not for an individual, but for a group of individuals. You really, really need CCW insurance or gun insurance, even if you're not a CCW holder. Go to one of the companies that provide insurance because they provide coverage. Some of the companies provide coverage for those issues.
For 5150s too?
Yes.
Interesting, because that is not a self-defense type of scenario,
Find a company and say, do you provide coverage for this? And I know the biggest company, USCCA, does. I'm not sure about the less well-known companies, but I would check their coverage. If you have a gun in your house or if you have a gun on your hip, you absolutely need some form of insurance. I don't care who you buy. Buy somebody, understand what you're getting from them.
That's a separate topic that I want to talk to you again about in a separate episode. Provide resources for new gun owners, be they immigrants or not. But I think that's important to talk about. We need to talk about that again.
Big deal.
Yeah.
All right, so 5150s. Have you ever been adjudicated a mental defective? I mean, that's a really high bar. Basically, has a court ever, not a cop off the street putting you in for a 72-hour hold, has a cop ever forced you to be committed?
You mean a judge?
Sorry, a judge. Yeah. Has a judge ever forced you to be committed?
Okay.
And if that's true, you're a prohibited person.
Okay.
But again, that's a really high bar for a very narrow group of people.
Okay.
Now we're getting into things that are a little more complicated and a little easier. Domestic violence restraining orders. In fact, almost all restraining orders, whether it's a civil harassment restraining order, a fight between you and your neighbor, whether it's a domestic violence restraining order, a fight between you and a family member, whether it's a gun violence restraining order, the cops saying you shouldn't have guns. All of those things can be filed on affidavit. So a cop arrests you for a crime, and your crime involves a gun. Cop will, in San Diego County, which is the tip of the spear in California for filing gun violence restraining orders. In fact, in California, San Diego County is 10% of the population of the state of California. We file 33 to 35% of the gun violence restraining orders are filed in San Diego County.
Yeah.
That's become a large part of my business, representing people on those.
So if there's any type of dispute, violent or otherwise, between you and a girlfriend or boyfriend that you don't live with, is that also domestic violence?
Yes. Yes, family members. You don't have to live with them.
Yeah.
It's domestic violence. And here's the thing. Anybody can go into court and file a domestic violence restraining order.
Even a person that's not part of the household or the family?
Well, it has to affect them.
Oh, okay.
And no, for gun violence restraining orders, it could be your boss.
For gun violence restraining
could
order,
be a
it could be
teacher.
anybody. It could be an online person.
It could be
shitposter.
anybody.
Yeah,
Domestic violence has to be interfamilial.
Yeah.
But they can go into court and they file this, and the judge reads it. And remember, you're not responding to any of these.
Right.
You don't have a right to respond because their judge is just acting on your filed declaration.
And there's no consequences for the person filing if it is determined it was wrong, correct?
If the judge determines there's not enough proof to grant a full restraining order, no, there's no consequence unless it's false. And it can be proven to be false. And then they filing a false document, it could be perjury. I mean, there's other charges, but that rarely happens.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that somebody goes in and says, you beat them up and you have guns and they're scared of you. That's simple. That's on the form. That is almost always going to be granted as a temporary restraining order by a judge, a TRO, which is not a permanent restraining order, which we call an RO. So, what happens when the judge says, yeah, I'm going to sign off on this TRO? Well, you get a hearing on that 3 weeks later. 21 days later is the maximum you get a hearing on that. But guess what happens in those 21 days?
Well, you lose your guns, you lose your CCW.
You'll be served with the temporary restraining order by a cop, and you will have 24 hours to divest yourself of your guns. Mm-hmm. And you will have 48 hours to put under penalty of perjury statement into the court saying that you did that. So you're going to lose your CCW immediately upon that TRO being granted with no input from you. You're going to lose your CCW, you're going to lose your guns, and you can't even keep them in the house. You got to give them to an FFL, you got to give them to the cops. You have to get them off of your ownership. Now 3 weeks later, you come into court.
Does that include ammo?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Ammunition, firearms, and body armor.
Okay.
You can't own any of those during that 3 week period. And now we have a hearing.
Yeah.
Gun violence restraining orders, the standard's pretty high. The government, police department almost always, depending upon your jurisdiction. San Diego Police Department does a lot, but in San Diego, you're seeing some out of Chula Vista, National City, Carlsbad, El Cajon. If the cops in San Diego are really, again, at the tip of the spear, because the city attorney, former city attorney, Mara Elliott, she was the person that jammed and advanced gun violence restraining orders, not just in San Diego, but in the state of California. And so the responsive agency to her is responsive, San Diego Police Department. Well, when you come in, they have to prove by clear and convincing evidence that you're going to be a danger if you have firearms. And depending upon what the underlying facts are, that can be difficult to overcome.
So this is a stupid question, and it's not even a serious question. But so you have to give up your guns.
Yep.
Because they're, you can use those as weapons to inflict harm on other people. Do you have to give up all your kitchen knives?
You do not.
Do you have to give up your car?
You do not.
No. So, okay. Stupid question. I knew the answer to that, but
you still have the ability to inflict damage on people. You're just not going to do it with firearms. And again, we're back to where we started discussing California and misdemeanor prohibitions. California does everything conceivably possible under the guise of public safety to make firearms ownership and regulation as difficult as possible for normal people.
You can still have a hammer in the garage, a saw, a hatchet, kitchen knives, your car. Those are all still available to you.
Well, it goes to not just the physical act of making purchase and ownership difficult. It goes to changing the language. So you're conditioning the population that gun owners are doing something wrong, such as the made-up term assault weapon, such as the made-up term high-capacity magazine, such as the made-up term gun violence, since 60 to 70% of gun violence is suicide by firearm. And so these made-up terms are done to condition the population to isolate gun owners and imply that they're doing something incorrect, wrong, or morally wrong. All right, that's my rant on that. All right, so we've gone through crimes, we've gone through mental issues, we've gone through restraining orders, and we arrive at
Minors.
minors. Yeah, under 18, but that's being litigated right now.
Yeah.
For guns. In fact, all states that have a 21-year prohibition for guns, whether it's firearms or rifles or whatever, shotguns, whatever, all states that have those are under some form of attack under Bruin.
Yeah.
That's a violation of the Second Amendment, keeping a 19-year-old from owning a pistol. And I agree with that.
Me too.
I'm sorry. If you're 18 and you're old enough to drink, you're old enough to drive, hopefully not in those combinations. You're old enough to get married, you're old enough to serve in the military and die.
Yeah. You can get
you're old
elected
enough to
into
vote.
office.
You know what? You get a gun.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry your brain hasn't developed, but you still get a gun because the Constitution says that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And so you're a person. And I think that all of those laws are failing in the United States right now and will eventually fail completely. And that 18-year-olds will be allowed to own firearms.
All right. So we've had felons, we've had minors, we've had dishonorable discharges, we've had what else? do we
Mental
have?
issues.
Mental issues. What else
Minors.
is there? Minors. Okay.
Okay,
now
we're
talk
foreigners
about,
now.
Let's talk about foreigners, aliens.
Well, that's it's interesting that we're talking about this today, since yesterday or the day before, a case came out of the Seventh Circuit. The United States is broken up federally into judicial districts.
Yeah.
There are a lot of district courts. What I think there's 700 and something district courts, something like that. There are 13 federal circuits. And each circuit controls a group of states. So basically, all of the federal law litigation that comes out of those states go to that circuit. Well, out of the Seventh Circuit, which is in the Midwest, upper Midwest, Seventh Circuit had a case that involved a alien.
So, we talked about this right before we started recording. I was more than in the middle. I was done writing an article about this decision that, as it was before yesterday.
Yeah.
The article was done. I was just tweaking it a little bit. And then this morning I opened up my phone and I saw this thing and I'm like, dang it, now I have to rewrite this whole thing because this decision...
The answer is yes. You have to rewrite the whole thing.
Overturned the previous decision. So let me give you a quick summary of the case. So this person, Heriberto Carvajal Flores, correct me on the pronunciation if you want, was in Chicago, an unlawful alien, illegal alien, whatever you want to call it, somebody without authorization to be in the United States. Got himself a gun, as far as I understand, loaned or borrowed from somebody else during a period of unprecedented civil unrest, the George Floyd riots. No criminal...
The Summer of Love.
Yeah, 2020. No previous violent convictions, no violent criminal convictions. Got some tickets or whatever, speeding tickets or something like that. Nothing crazy. Completely normal type of person. No convictions, no criminal history, no gang affiliations, nothing. Got himself a gun for personal protection, and fired a couple of shots at a, as I read it, as a passing vehicle. Although in some other sources I read that he was under the impression that the driver of the vehicle was about to run him over and hit him and, commit an assault with the vehicle. So it was self-defense. But the only charge that this guy was charged with was the unlawful possession. No illegal discharge, no assault, none of that.
Well, it's Chicago, so that's cool.
Yeah,
it's cool in the state of Illinois. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
That's not a problem.
The only charge was the unlawful possession. Now, the judge in that case initially said, sure, that's a good charge, convicted. But then in 2022, Bruin came out and they reversed the decision and said, actually, now that we're looking at historical context, text,
The
and
federal
tradition,
district court reversed the conviction.
correct. So the judge, Sharon Coleman, said, we're going to reverse this and drop the charges and, you're cleared. And that brought everything into question about gun ownership for illegal aliens for a period. Am I summarizing this correctly so far?
Yeah.
Okay. So this person then was cleared, and now all of a sudden we were looking at, is this now a precedent for illegal aliens to become lawful gun owners? There's definitely not a process for that because none of the forms and the procedures have changed. You still have to do your background check and all that sort of stuff. But then now the district court in the Seventh Circuit said, or the Seventh Circuit, said, wait, we don't agree with that assessment because there is tradition, there is an analog that you have to swear allegiance and you have to, be loyal to the United States, so to say, because that's what they did after the revolution with the British, the loyalists. Whoever swore an oath to the United States could get guns, and whoever didn't could not.
As soon as they washed off their Tory stink,
Right.
they were allowed to own guns.
Yeah, so they've said, okay, that's the condition on gun ownership. Then the historical analog is citizen, not citizen, or even as a non-citizen, a green card holder, permanent alien, legal resident, is not a prohibited person because in order to get the green card, you have to,
Swear allegiance.
Swear allegiance. So what's the consequences now of that case? Is everything the way it was before?
Well, yes, everything is back to, and still is, where it was before, which was that aliens who are in the country illegally, LPRs, lawful permanent residents, people that the United States have granted a right to be in the country on a path to citizenship, those people can own guns. Mm-hmm. If you're in the country illegally, you can't own a gun. It's federal law. I think it was 922 of the...
Title 18.
Yeah, 922 G1.
G5.
G5? Okay.
I think. I'm doing that from memory.
Okay, yeah, me too. But there are two parts to the opinion. And the first part, which was only less than 5 paragraphs. This was a pretty big opinion. It was like 30 or 40 pages. But 5 paragraphs was devoted to the first question.
Who are the people?
Is an illegal alien a people under the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed? So if you're not a people, then the Second Amendment doesn't apply to you. So you have no right to have a gun.
Right.
So in order, Mr. Carbajal had to be a people under the Second Amendment. And they disposed of that in 5 paragraphs, although they did acknowledge that they are an outlier. They found Mr. Carbajal to be a people.
Right.
And they acknowledged, and most of that 5 paragraphs was talking about what other circuits, United States circuits, had found. And most circuits have found that illegal aliens are not a people under the Second Amendment.
So what was the arguments that they used to say, in fact, in this case, he is? So first of all, they make it a case by case, right?
Right.
They are not saying this is a categorical ban on illegal aliens from the people. Some can and some are not part of the people, right?
Right.
Okay, so in this case, what's their reasoning for saying he is part of the people?
They're saying that the Supreme Court precedent is so ambiguous on whether illegal aliens are people for purposes of the Second Amendment that we're going to say that they are. But they do acknowledge that 3 other circuits said they're not, and they did acknowledge 2 other circuits assumed that somebody was a people if they were here illegally, but didn't decide it on that issue because they were going to decide it on the historical analog issue.
Okay.
But this is the only circuit that I know of that has come out and said, based on Supreme Court precedent and their lack of clear guidance, we're going to find that illegal aliens are people. Mm-hmm. If the Supreme Court does take this case, and I don't think they will, because the result of the law being upheld is still in effect. So I think Mr. Carbajal Flores is likely to appeal to the Supreme Court. I don't know if they'll take the case because it won't change. They won't be changing the law by doing it.
And this has to be narrowly applied to the Second Amendment, right? This has no bearing on voting rights and any of that.
And no bearing on the other amendments because for purposes of the other amendments and different amendments, different results.
Well, and also in it doesn't. Not all the amendments talk about people. Some talk about persons. Some talk about citizens. So there's, persons is any human.
For example, everybody in the United States is subject to the protections against cruel and unusual punishment.
Correct.
And so that just makes sense.
Yeah. First Amendment is one of those as well.
Right. Within limits. And here's what I mean. Secretary Rubio is not letting people into the United States because of what they've said. You don't get a visa. So you are constricted under the First Amendment. And the Second Amendment doesn't apply to you if you're illegally in the United States.
Interesting. Okay. Well, first of all, you have to be in the United States,
correct,
to get that protection. If you say something,
but you could have your visa revoked if you're in the United States based on things that you have said and done. It's that case of the person from Colombia.
Okay.
I mean, that's a big issue right now.
Yeah.
That's all because of, does the First Amendment apply to you, and what are the protections?
Yeah, I mean that's an important issue. First Amendment. I mean, we're doing a podcast. My main purpose is the Second Amendment, but First Amendment is equally important in this case because we're doing the podcast. So freedom of speech is. But I get where some of those decisions are coming from. You know, I'm not saying I categorically say you are allowed to say anything and everything. There are First Amendment restrictions, like child pornography, for example.
But there are First Amendment restrictions between immigrants, between
immigrants
people
and citizens.
in the country and citizens.
Correct.
There are differences. There are differences in the level of, quote, process you are due, or due process. There are different levels of due process that are afforded to immigrants and afforded to citizens.
Yeah, that's
So
true. And a lot of countries have those.
Yes.
I mean, my native Germany has, they have two categories for basic human rights. There's one that's called a Jedermann Grundrecht, which we like the long words in Germany. That's one word, which means anybody's basic rights.
Well, German's never been a love language. So it's,
and then there is Deutsche Grundrechte, which means German basic rights. So there are some that apply only to Germans, and there are some that apply to everybody. And a lot of countries have those, including the United States.
yes. So that was the first question, was whether he was a people. And they came to the conclusion he was a people. There's a really interesting side note on that. They said that they understood why the other jurisdictions, the other circuits rejected somebody being a people, because they owed allegiance to a foreign country.
Yeah.
They hadn't sworn allegiance to the United States. Well, you know where that might bleed over into? 14th Amendment and birthright citizenship. Because the 14th Amendment just doesn't say if you're born in the United States, if you can make it over the border and pop out a kid, they're an American citizen. It doesn't just say that. It says, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Well, that seems very analogous to owing allegiance to a foreign power.
Right.
And so there's an interesting twist on the case that just came out with Carvajal, that it might be used for birthright citizenship.
Interesting.
Yeah. All right, so we're on to part two. So that was part one.
Part two, yeah.
And they said, all right, you know what? He's a people. Let's move to part two. You don't get a gun. And they said that because of the Bruin requirement, which says that you cannot have restrictions on firearms that were not historically based in previous analogs in American history. So you can't make up a restriction right now if it didn't come out of somewhere in American history, particularly at the founding, that allowed those restrictions.
Okay.
And so what they found was, no, there's been a long history of the United States of allowing non-citizen illegal aliens, people that refuse to swear allegiance to the United States, the long history of the United States curtailing firearms rights. And so we find that 922G is analogous to those. And we're going to say you can't have a gun.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
simple.
It's pretty straightforward.
Yes.
So we're back to square one.
Well, we're back to where we were,
Yeah.
at least in that case, which is illegal aliens can't have guns, and people that are legal aliens can have guns. I mean, that only seems to make common sense to me. I mean, I'm a gun owner and a gun proponent.
Yeah.
I don't think people that are illegally in the country should be allowed to have guns. I'm not an absolutist on gun rights.
Yeah, I am more than you, but that's a whole different topic. I think that's my favorite unpopular opinion. But okay, so
Except for Germans. Germans illegal, so that'd be okay with
That-
with
that
having
would be
guns.
okay
And
to
Scottish
you?
illegal, so it's
okay,
It's I carve out. I've got an exception for those two groups.
okay. That seems like unfair treatment.
Yeah, that would be a violation of equal protection, I think.
Did we cover all categories?
Oh
Or
yeah,
is there somebody else?
we've covered all the categories. There's drug users.
Okay.
There's a form when you fill out and buy a gun. There's that question that says, are you now or have you ever been addicted to
Controlled
narcotics?
substances,
Yeah,
yeah.
to foreign substances. And the one that
would
got
that-
the
would
one that
that
got
be a
Hunter
ban?
Biden.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's
That's
the one that
right.
got Hunter Biden. Yeah.
I don't know if this is still the case. There was a time when you were not allowed to possess a firearm, either the possession or the CCW, if you had a medical marijuana card. Marijuana card.
The problem
That's
is
a difficult
that
word for me.
that's been such a convoluted area of law because most states have allowed
Recreational use.
marijuana use, and,
Yeah.
and never mind, just go out and buy it. And so the question now, and it's an open question, I don't know anybody that's being prosecuted for that. Like, I guess theoretically, a strict reading of federal law, if you're a marijuana user, you are not allowed to own firearms.
Okay. So after the recreational use became legal, did that have an influence on the medical card? Did they get rid of that ban? Or?
I don't hear much about medical cards anymore.
Yeah,
because
you don't need it anymore.
Because you don't need it. I think under federal law, you're a little more covered if you have a medical card for it. But I'm not, I'm not real sure on that. I just don't see much marijuana litigation.
Okay.
Besides for the big growers.
Yeah. So let's say, here's a hypothetical, or maybe this has happened to you, I don't know. But let's say you have somebody who's relatively new in the country, who is an immigrant with legal status, let's say, who is not a prohibited person, or who believe to be not a prohibited person. And they come to you or a lot of your colleagues, if you know what other people are doing, and they want to find out, how can I become a gun owner? What do I need to do? Can you check for me if I'm prohibited or not? Do those people typically get a free consultation?
Yes.
What are the resources so let's say you don't know anybody in the gun community, you don't know who to ask, you don't know the clubs, you don't know the instructors, and you did a quick Google search and a list of attorneys came up. Is that a common thing that people come to you and say?
No, most immigrants, it's a very narrow category of people, legal immigrants.
Yeah.
I've had a couple come to me. Basically, I talk to them and say, tell me where you came from. Tell me your criminal history, because you don't have one here. Tell me your criminal history. Do you have a criminal history from Germany? Do you have a criminal history from Scotland?
That's a funny thing you say that, because I was, I don't want to say I was appalled, but I was, it definitely made me scratch my head. So let's say I come to America as a grown-up, not as a child. I have 30 years history in my home country, let's say Germany. And I could be a serial rapist, a career bank robber, a hitman, you name it, whatever, drug dealer, and I have a rap sheet of convictions in Germany. Then I come to America, and then America goes, "Hi, Germany, this is America. Do you know Matthias?" "Yeah, we know Matthias. What's up? Yeah, let me know what's going on." They don't do that. So you come over here and you have a clean sheet, you have a white vest, you are not implied in anything.
Well, if you've got legal status, like if you're on an LPR, they've done some form of background on you, and you've answered under penalty of perjury. So you've falsified your immigration documents, so you have additional problems.
Sure, but only if they find out.
Only if they find out.
I'm not encouraging anybody to break the law, that's what I'm saying.
We're connected to Interpol too.
Well, you have to do some real serious shit to end up on their list.
Right. Well, but they could get, it's pretty easy to get criminal histories out of foreign jurisdictions, most anyway. But here's the more complicated issue. You're from Iran and you've been convicted of treason.
In Iran.
Okay, so what was the treason? You said that perhaps we should have democratic elections. That was your treason.
Yeah.
And so when you're going outside our jurisdiction to look at foreign convictions, you have to look at the nature of the conviction. You have to look at the elements of the offense. And the question, at least for the criminal law anyway, and for immigration law, is would that crime have been a crime in the United States?
Ah. Okay.
There has to be an analog. And we do that a lot when we're looking at different states. Like California wants to increase punishment because you've got a violent felony out of Iowa. Well, could that have in fact been a crime in California? And I had a lot of litigation when Three Strikes Law came out in California over foreign jurisdictions. And Arizona comes to mind, that somebody had a burglary in Arizona. Well, it wouldn't have been a burglary in California because you can commit a burglary in Arizona by being outside the house. You can't commit a burglary in California without being having to get in the house. And so all of those things will come up. But could you hide? I guess theoretically, yeah, you could hide your criminal history. You could lie about it on your visa application, and you could come over here and get a gun if you're an LPR. I guess theoretically you could do it. Nobody's backgrounding. I mean, and that's one of the problems with immigration. How are we vetting a Yemeni immigrant?
Right.
You know, who are we going to in Yemen, the Houthis, to give us somebody's criminal history and their fingerprints? So we have no ability to background people from certain countries. None.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that was one of the basis for the so-called Muslim ban.
So,
was-
and for me, that's actually an argument for saying for against certain pieces of gun control and background checks and stuff like that, especially background checks. Because if you allow somebody to, somebody has a green card, they came over here, they are either lying or not disclosing their criminal history. But you do that with Americans who had the misfortune of being born here, and let's say they were 17, in 1990, they were 17 and got convicted for marijuana, which now is not illegal anymore, but that conviction stays. That's kind of unfair. So, that could be used as an argument against background checks.
Yes, but what kind of background check are they doing? I mean, for your FFL background check that's happening, if we go out here and go buy a gun next door, well, all they're doing is running United States computers.
Right.
They're not running you in your foreign jurisdiction. I guess it could come up, but I don't know how. I don't know how they get that information. I mean,
Yeah,
I know
exactly.
in serious cases, serious criminal cases, the district attorneys will generally try to get foreign jurisdiction information.
How long does that take?
Depends on the jurisdiction.
Okay.
I mean, they have to go through the State Department, but there's almost always police liaisons.
Yeah.
It's easy to get from the UK. It's easy to get from the EU. Those aren't hard to get those things. You just ask for them.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's a moderate process. It's not coming tomorrow.
Yeah.
I've seen it done in a couple of my cases is foreign jurisdiction criminal histories.
Interesting.
Then
right.
interpreting them is a different issue.
Yeah, I mean, they have a different penal code. They
Right.
have, not only the language is different.
I've got to hire basically a German lawyer
Yeah.
to interpret what this means.
I did spend a couple semesters in law school in Germany. Yeah, so legal, both for Germany and for German and English, this is true that the legal language and the colloquial language have barely anything in common. It's so difficult to read a legal text in English, in my opinion. When I do that on the rare occasion, I struggle. It's hard. Then I ask you.
Yeah, right. And that's why I'm on retainer.
Yeah. All right. So recap: we have felons, we have illegal aliens, we have minors, we have mental issues,
Drug issues, military
and
issues,
dishonorable discharges,
restraining orders.
restraining orders.
That's about it.
That's about it. Okay. So that's good to know. So anybody coming over here or being over here for a minute already, if you want to learn more about firearms, how to become a gun owner, if you're a prohibited person or not, what I would recommend to you is ask somebody that you know in the gun community. If you do that with a grain of salt. If they're not a legal professional, they might have heard this from a friend who has a cousin who works at a gun shop. Then you have people who are FFLs. Ask them because they hopefully know this because they need to vet you when you buy a gun. Google it, do the literature, but your best bet is always to ask a legal professional, which I'm not. I'm not an attorney, but Gary is. Whoever the attorney is that you trust, ask them. That way you're on the safe side. But otherwise, I'd encourage you to just hang out with people who are in the gun community. Even if you have no experience, you have no military background or anything like that, I think you'll figure out pretty quickly who is a safe member of the gun community, who is not. If your gut feeling is telling you these people are doing something they shouldn't be doing, like they drink when they shoot, or They don't use vetted ranges with medical equipment, with range safety officers. Be cautious about those kind of situations. I'm not saying those are all fishy. I've gone shooting on BLM land with friends. That's, a legitimate recreational activity in America. But, call me, give me a call. I'm happy to give you the resources that I have. The more gun owners there are, the better. And the bigger the community, the better. The more diverse the gun community is, the better. And I'm always curious to hear your origin stories, to find out where you come from. Why is gun ownership important to you or not? I'm open to all of those discussions. Best way to get in touch with me is Instagram. That is San Diego Firearms School, all one word. San Diego Firearms School. There's 2 S's in there. Or you send me an email, San Diego Firearms School, sandiego.firearmsschool@gmail.com. I'm always curious to talk to people. There's definitely some interesting conversations that we can have out there. And with that, let's call that a wrap. We'll have more episodes. We'll talk to more interesting people. I have a few episodes in the pipeline already. And at the end of one of these, you always tell people to like and subscribe. It helps the algorithm. Do a comment. That's always good. And you'll probably hear another conversation with me and Gary at some point. And I promise you, there will be a lot of interesting people here that I'm going to talk to. So tune in again next time when you're listening to The Immigrant Gun Owner. My name is Matthias. That's Lucky back there. You'll see more of us.
Bye.